All right. Again, thanks for joining. My name is Javier Perez. I'm a Senior Director of Product Marketing. I cover security for Veeam. I actually joined less than a year ago, exactly after last year's VeeamON. So super excited to be here. My background is on application security, open source security. And one of the things that I wanted to learn and be part of is ransomware incident response. Had opportunity to, from day one, to join the team, the Veeam cybersecurity program that includes the Coveware incident response retainer. So delighted to be here. And I have a co-presenter here. You met all at the keynote, Bill Siegel. So a pleasure to have you here, Bill. And we're going to have a great talk. We're going to have a talk about ransomware, right? In my opinion, super interesting topic. We've been reading a lot about this. I've been working with the Coveware team. So really, really interesting case. Some of you have seen, let me just move here away from the, some of you have seen that we are organizing events in different cities. We used to call their inner circle events. Now we just rebranded that as the Big Connect executive briefings. We go to multiple cities. We rent a nice restaurant, bar, and we invite CIOs and CISOs from local, from the city. And we have a 3-hour session where we talk about incident response. And we have some of our architects, our field CISOs from Coveware, and we have a really good interaction, really good conversations about incident response. Well, as part of that event, what we've been doing is we have a gift for all the attendees to this event. By the way, highly recommended. Check it out if there's an event in your city. Join, because really fascinating conversations, and you have CISOs telling war stories and sharing information with their peers. So very, very interesting. So one of the gifts that we give to our guests on those sessions, it's a book. And that book, it's called The Ransomware Hunting Team. Fascinating book about the history of ransomware. And that's the inspiration for this talk. So I'm going to give you like the condensed, like really, really short version of the history of ransomware. And I want you to, please, as you hear this stuff happen a few years ago, think about how can your organization be prepared for those contingencies and those cases. So I'm going to walk you through that, and then we're going to move into the new stuff, right? The trends that we see that the Coveware team see every day on real-life cases when helping customers that are in the middle of a ransomware attack, right? And how to help them. So without further ado, let me just go quickly through some of the history, early beginnings of ransomware. Did you know that the first documented ransomware case is the AIDS Trojan? 1989. Some of you that are like my age or older, you remember that at late 80s was a whole news about AIDS, right? Way before the pandemic. Everything was about AIDS. Famous people contracted AIDS, right? Rock Hudson, Freddie Mercury, Magic Johnson. So that was a big deal. And there was conferences and people trying to share information about AIDS, right? And there was a World Health Organization conference where they talk about AIDS. And this biologist, Joe Pop, had an idea. How about I share information about AIDS to all the attendees of that conference? And maybe I can share that in a floppy disk. Do you remember floppy disks? Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you are younger than, 40 years old, you don't know floppy disks, right? Or younger than 50. But imagine you're giving away the floppy disk and then you put it on your computer. It's like today if we give away dongles, if you put it in your computer. No, right? Please don't do it. If you get a dongle, don't put it in your laptop, right? On your computer. Same thing, give away floppy disks. Floppy disk had actually information about AIDS and a little bit of a survey. I was just chuckling because the previous session was about resilience model, the maturity model. And based on a survey, we tell you where are you on the maturity. Well, this guy did that about AIDS. Like based on a survey, it tells you, the possibility of contracting AIDS and things like that. Well, at the same time of providing that information, it was encrypting files on the computer. And depending on how much you use it, a few hours later, a few days later, you had your files encrypted, and then you had a message, which is that one, basically saying, you have to pay us for the licenses. It didn't say ransom, it says licenses, right? So if you want to decrypt it. So that's the first documented case. By the way, as a result of that, in the UK, they criminalized hacking in 1990, right? As a result of that specific case. Not much during the 90s. It was all about viruses. All of you remember viruses? Talking about age again. When I was in college in the 90s, everyone was worried about viruses, right? Professor will you'll fail if you give me a virus on your diskette, on your homework, and all of that. So not a lot happening, but starting in the 2000s, that's when the encryption got more serious. And in those cases, they actually went and started with RSA type of encryption, which makes it a lot more difficult to crack, right? And started demanding, obviously, the ransom, right? Officially demanding for a ransom. In these 10 years, 2013, 2023, and again, I'm going super quick here, we have some major cases. But key piece on ransomware, obviously, was the resurgence of cryptocurrency, right? To make it easier to pay the ransom. And, you can track it, which we do now, right? The wallets, and it's part of, it's all public, but you don't know who's receiving that money, and make it obviously easier for this. Bill can tell you a lot more, and we'll talk about that later on this. Appearance of ransomware as a service. Just to be clear, ransomware as a service is basically bad guys, threat actor groups, making it easier for other people to do ransomware attacks, right? Make it easier to go and steal credentials, make it easier to get the payments, make it easier to do the communication with the victims, and all these services to make it easier to run ransomware. So a big appearance on that. Another big piece here was be able to just threat actors started exfiltrating data, basically stealing data, and making it available in the public, but making it available in the dark web. So that over those 10 years, that was a big piece of what we know today as ransom, right? And of course, the explosion of strengths. How many? Go ahead.
I'm going to make one point here. I talked a little bit earlier about the repetitiveness of these actors. And this is an important slide to demonstrate that. GanCrab, 2018. Same actors turn into Sodinokibi. Sodinokibi famously hit Kaseya. Everyone remembers that, right? That was pretty bad. The Kaseya attack was very, very close to the same time as the DarkSide attack. These are groups that have, members of them, a couple of them actually got imprisoned in Russia, but members of them are still active today, hopscotching group to group to group. So you look at that slide and you say, well, that was a long time ago. Those guys are long gone. No, same guys. They're still out there. They have rebranded half a dozen times since then.
Great point. And this basically continues with that, exactly that, right? I just talked about a few years here. Frankly, the names are not important, but the tactics, the way they go after, that's where we've seen, Coveware cases, we've seen them again and again, right? Just a couple of things to highlight extras, right? That jigsaw, that was interesting because they were very aggressive, and if you don't pay us, you're going to delete this much data, and you don't pay us by tomorrow, we're going to delete more data and more data. So that was kind of different, right? That was a kind of a milestone. The other one, the WannaCry, have you heard about the WannaCry? That was, now way back. That was the first one, the ransomware attack that affected more than 200,000 computers in the world, right? Demanding payment in Bitcoin. So a lot of interesting things. I'm just going to go, again, super quick here as we go, like, bottom piece. Double extortion, big piece on ransomware, right? Not just encrypting your data, but exfiltrating your data. So we exfiltrate it and we encrypt it. If you don't pay us, we'll make data, your customer data, your sensitive data, public, the dark web. And if you don't pay us, also, we're not going to give you the decryption keys for everything that got encrypted. So double extortion. Later on, I have it somewhere there. Yeah, 2023 and later, there are cases of triple extortion, where either they have the capabilities to perform a denial of service attack because they have enough control to do that, or they basically are harassing customers and executives about the ransomware. And if they don't pay, you're going to lose all your data, you're going to lose your sales and operations and so on. So big pieces, big highlights on the kind of a history of ransomware. I can talk for hours about this one. I'm going to leave it there. I don't want to.
Javier,
yeah.
One more point here, right? Thousands of strains.
Thousands.
There's probably 200 people in this audience. About 200 people responsible for all of that. Very small, concentrated world of threat actors. Same groups, same people, over and over again.
Yeah. So within this story, somewhere in 2018, Bill and Alex had an idea, and I wonder if you can share with us a story of Coveware, Bill. I'm sure people are very interested to hear.
Yeah, sure. So the main issue we identified was that there was no really good first-party collected data on what actually occurs during a ransomware attack. And for as big of a problem as it was, it struck us as odd that no one was trying to figure out how these things were happening and how you could stop it. It was it was like trying to build a safe car, but you don't have the crash test dummies and crashing the car into the wall and watching it in slow motion. And so we set out to trying to build some collection trap. What was the business model that we could set up that would allow us to collect lots of data about these incidents in a first-hand basis? And so we identified this little sliver of incident response, handling threat actor negotiations as sort of a foothold to be able to do that. We had zero experience negotiating, never negotiated. I mean, I couldn't even negotiate a used car purchase myself when I founded the company. But we realized very quickly that by aggregating data from these incidents, we could forecast how they were going to turn out. The threat actors were so repetitive, they were just copying and pasting their own phrases and words and negotiation tactics, and we could literally forecast exactly what they were going to say and when they were going to change their price, and that gave us a big edge. And then we legged into the more technical aspects of data recovery and hired some excellent reverse engineers to try and start building tools that could break or crack the encryption, looking for vulnerabilities, and we've sort of scaled it up from there. But it was really always centered around the idea that if you can aggregate the information that is exhausted from these incidents, you can do useful things with it. We've actually never tried to grow our incident response business. We probably could have. It could be 5 times as large as it is today, but we don't want it to be that big because there's no point. Because it's really just an intelligence gathering apparatus that fuels all the other things that we do and build.
Yeah, and talking about intelligence, from very early on, Coveware started, or actually Bill, you started this quarterly TTP analysis report. Can you tell us a little bit more about this quarterly report?
Yeah, so we felt that there was a lot of, I wouldn't call it misinformation, but just scattered information out there on what's actually happening. And I always say I'm a terrible salesperson. I'm a worse marketer. I have the worst marketing instincts out there. But when you have the truth, it actually makes it pretty straightforward to market. And so we figured, well, if you can just publish, like, here's the top 10 actors every quarter, and we can do that for years and years on end. You can develop a static cohort to actually look back and see what's changing. If you can do the same thing with tactics, if you can do the same thing with indicators of compromise, if you can do the same thing with outcomes, you can actually have very useful databases on what's occurring within incidents. And so the goal with our reports, a lot of which we publish publicly, but some of which just go into our quarterly TTP adversaries, are to make sure that we're always looking back at the same thing from a previous period and not changing that up. That's really the only way to really judge what's actually happening in the world, and to not use third-party information, because third-party sources change. You can't control their quality, so you won't always have to use first-party data.
This is data from last year. Some of the trends that we saw based on that quarterly report, right? And again, it really doesn't matter that much of the name. You're going to hear Akira articles and here's and that, but it's some of the same tactics, techniques, procedures. We also seen many kind of independent, like we call it the lone wolves, right? Independent, because they have access to all these tools with ransomware as a service and trying to do attacks. And when you see there on the chart, something that we also publish every quarter, and that's the attack vectors, right? I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Payments is interesting, Bill. I mean, this is one of the ways you started, right? The Coveware. Can you tell the audience here a little bit more about that? I mean, it's not just paying in cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is an area where I don't like to aggrandize this because the media likes to be like, well, what was the largest ransom ever paid? And these aren't healthy things to publicize, to be candid. And also, it's something that threat actors can weaponize if you provide too much transparency on it. So the main thing that we always wanted to focus on here is, people read articles about some obscene ransom being paid by somebody somewhere. It's not really what's important. What matters is, in reality, most ransoms are pretty small, right? The median ransom that's paid is, is less than $100,000. It's low. That's what's happening to most companies out there that actually end up succumbing to this. And then, by the way, when you work with us, most of the time you don't end up paying. So we don't want to give the impression that this is something that occurs every single day. We actively work with our customers to find every possible way to avoid a ransom payment.
Yeah, there are always some outliers there. Right? I mean, some of you remember Colonial Pipeline. I believe that they paid $4.4 million or something like that. There are always outliers. By the way, that Colonial Pipeline, they were able to recover that money, right? Like they were.
But that was a bit of a fluke. The bad guys had made a bad OPSEC error.
Yeah. Across all industries, we've seen it, right? Maybe a bit more into the healthcare industry because, if you're attacking a hospital, probably more likely to go and fix that immediately, right? But it's across all industries in company size.
Yeah, and professional services, this is predominantly these are your small businesses right there, right? Your small local and regional CPA firms, your small local and regional law offices, consulting firms. Really, if you look at the demographics of the United States in terms of just what industry breakdown, you'll see the professional service firms, I think they're about like 11, 12%, a little higher on the ransomware side because these are the types of firms that unfortunately tend to sort of underinvest in security and redundancy.
I was going to mention earlier, Coveware is really dealing with ransomware attacks every day, right? Every day. And the quarterly report, it's basically hundreds, right? There are more than 100 cases that we're summarizing in our quarterly report. So it's happening all the time, and here with the expertise. So you also saw on the keynote that we are actually launching officially tomorrow the 2025 ransomware trends and proactive strategies, that's a new name, proactive strategies report. That's, some of you remember that we've been doing that ransomware trends report every year. Big survey, more than 1,300 respondents, organizations from all over the world. And we work very closely with the Coveware team also to put together this report. And it's a bit of kind of a combined results from survey with real cases that we have from Coveware. And these are the trends. We're going to have other sessions talking about that tomorrow as we kind of officially make the report available in the website, press release, blog post, everything there. But let me just walk you quickly through these trends. And I'm standing up because I can see the clock here. there's been just in Q4 of 2024, a lot of law enforcement takedowns. Actually, Bill on the quarterly report. By the way, it's available as a blog post on the Coveware website and on the Veeam website. That kind of a summary blog post of the quarterly report. And just in Q4 last year, a lot of takedowns, a lot of really good activity, even cooperating law enforcement agencies from different countries. So that obviously has an impact, and that's a good thing, right? But we're not winning yet. Data exfiltration, we've seen more of data exfiltration, so either combined as a double extortion, as I mentioned, or exfiltrating data from cloud environments. We've seen more, like if it's a cloud environment, less about encryption, more about exfiltrating. So definitely a trend there. We just talked about payments decreasing. Legal consequences. There are more and more initiatives, and I'm trying to keep an eye on, there are more and more initiatives everywhere, all over the world, around ransomware, about, from banning payments to you have to report within 48 hours, or I believe in India it's now like under 24-hour reporting if ransomware attacks happen. So it's really, really hard to keep up with all that, but my recommendation to you is just take a look at that. Keep an eye on, especially on your region or your country, about those constant new laws, regulations, enforcement on that. Just here in the United States, different states have different requirements. So you have to keep an eye on that as well. We talked about this at the keynote. We've been talking about this for a few years. We need to get the IT and security teams to collaborate more. One of the results on the survey is that about 54%, I believe it's 54% of the respondents said, yes, we need to improve a lot more that collaboration between security and IT, right? So another big trend. And the last one, I saw that study in another session. It's 94% increase. So 94% of the respondents increase their budget on data resilience, on cybersecurity. The thing is that's still a small portion, right? Like it's not enough. So those are the trends. And to finish all this up, I have 2 slides for you, just to, we're going through the history, we're going to some of the latest trends. What that means for you, and let's basically to summarize this to you, summary, the most common attack vectors are those 3 that you see there. Phishing, please be very careful with that. A lot of employee security awareness. Make sure that you catch those, because it doesn't matter. I was saying on the previous in another session, it doesn't matter how good all the layers of security that you have in your organization. It just take one person to click on that phishing email, and then you might get compromised right away. Remote access compromise, that could be like stolen passwords. It could be social engineering, that they got access, right? A former employee, out-of-date VPN, and other things, right? And of course, software vulnerabilities. That's when we talk about patch, apply your patches, be on the latest versions of the software, because those are the ones that are fixing the vulnerabilities. Keynote here, and this is for my background on application security, 99% of the vulnerabilities, software vulnerabilities, have a fix. Because the smart way to do it is to disclose the vulnerability when you have the fix. Very few 0-day vulnerabilities that there's no fix yet. And in the one for Log4j, over a weekend, we got the fix, right? So very important to apply those patches. Those are the 3 main compromise vectors, attack vectors. And then the most common tactics after they get in from that first column, obviously the malware injection. Once they get it, they compromise, they can control what they're doing, and they can do things like lateral movement, right? Now you're in their network, now they're gonna go and find the way that is the easiest to attack, and they're gonna try also to escalate privileges. That's happening a lot with the VMware ESXi vulnerability, right? They get in, they get admin privileges, and now they have full control. They can even change passwords, and no one has access. And it makes it really hard for the teams here to go and do some troubleshooting, debugging, because they have full control of everything, right? So that's another common escalation of privileges. And as you well know here, hopefully everyone knows here, it's not just about attacking production, it's attacking the backup repositories, right? Because that way you cannot recover, so that is what they're going to try to attack. And then they do the exfiltration, the encryption, even destruction, right? That's how they impact. So, hopefully your security teams know about all these defense opportunities here, what I listed at the bottom of the screen there, right? Everything from zero trust principles to secure by design principles, more security tooling, and of course the more and more security features that we are adding to our Veeam Data Platform and Veeam Data Cloud. On the Coveware retainer, incident response retainer, so our customers with Coveware incident response retainer not only have the experts in the middle of if you suffer a ransomware attack, not only you have the expertise, you also have access, you have the quarterly reports that we talk about, quarterly sessions about the TTPs, and we help you with 24/7 global presence, 15-minute SLAs, and a key piece that I have to remind everyone, incident response is if you're suffering a ransomware attack, it's not specific to Veeam products or Veeam environments, right? Wherever it happens, we'll go and help you with that. So last piece here, a little bit of advice, and maybe you can help me here, Bill, with this. As we go and we help our customers and each one of these steps, here on the boxes you see a little bit, some advice, right? First one, hopefully it doesn't happen, but if it happens, you are under attack, you cannot access systems, you cannot access the databases, you cannot access files. The first piece, stay calm. Is that a good advice?
Try to stay calm.
Bill has dealt with so many stressed customers, right? Contact your legal team if you have cyber insurance. Contact the cyber insurance, and of course contact the Coveware incident response team. Then we go through the assessment. You have heard about the Recon scanner. I think it was mentioned at the keynote, right? Recon scanner is the technology, it's a software agent that we install, and it collects data to do the forensic analysis. We added that actually to the BDP, to Veeam Data Platform, as a proactive measure. So a little bit different use case, right? This is about identifying suspicious activity and so on. But if you are in the middle of a ransomware attack, one of the first things is collect data with Recon Scanner, and that's going to give us a good timeline of what to do next. You want to add there?
One of the key things as part of an assessment, and just like any assessment you're doing, like even your backup infrastructure, right? Seeing if it's good or not. You can't assume that your production data, even if it's unencrypted, that your production machines are still good to use in production. And if they are encrypted, you can't assume that they can be decrypted. So there's a lot of common, kind of misconceptions about, well, the bad guys encrypted it, we can just decrypt it. That's not always the case. But it doesn't have to be a guess either. We actually have software that can tell you definitively down to the file level which files will decrypt with a key and which files are toast and they're irrevocably corrupted. So it doesn't have to be a guess game, and it doesn't have to take long either.
I heard a case, I don't know if it's true, Bill, but like they just renamed the files and they made it look like they're encrypted, but they were just
renamed. It's been a while since we've seen that, but it wasn't uncommon because ransomware encryption doesn't fully encrypt a file because full encryption takes too long. So what do? They write an algorithm that chunks it. So, encrypt the first. If a file is between 1 byte and 1 kilobyte, encrypt 50% every so often. If the file is between 1 kilobyte and 1 gigabyte, encrypt 1% of the file in the following chunks. Otherwise, it takes too long. Well, there was some early ransomware that would just say like, well, if the file's over 1 gigabyte, just rename it. Just put the extension on it to make it look like it was encrypted under the auspices that people would be too lazy to actually look at every single file, which is not uncommon because if millions of files are encrypted, you're not going to go open all of them. So it's not uncommon at all for someone to open up a directory and be like, oh my God, everything's encrypted. It's all got the same extension. But for a large proportion of those to actually just be renamed.
Yeah.
And so we used to write Python scripts to just check and then rename the file back. Open it up, works fine.
Now the next step is negotiation. To be very clear, negotiating with threat actors doesn't mean that you're going to pay. It's communication. It's getting information, right? If they're saying that it's they exfiltrated data, well, maybe try to get proof of that exfiltration, right? And in a lot of cases, it's gaining time, right? You are communicating while you are recovering from your backups, or you're looking at how you are going to recover there. Anything there to add on the negotiation side?
Yeah, I mean, the key thing is most people have never been through this before, and you don't. People say, "Oh, negotiations means you're going to pay." Absolutely not. You don't. The only decisions that you have to make as it relates to a threat actor that's extorting you is like, do you bother talking to them? It's not a foregone conclusion that you have to negotiate. You don't. In fact, there are a lot of, I can't tell you how many cases every day we get on the phone and we assess and we say, it's not worth your time. It's just going to be a distraction. They're going to harass you. It's going to worry you. You're going to lose sleep. You're going to lose focus. And you're not going to get anything of value anyway. So don't even bother talking to them. That's it. Just go restore from your backups and go work with your lawyers, and that's it. So it's not this is part of our service, and we negotiate every day on behalf of clients. But we tell a lot of customers not to bother, and frankly, not to even hire us because it's not a good idea. It's just gonna distract them.
You need expertise, right? Going back to the ransomware trends report, we ask customers that suffer a ransomware attack if they communicated directly with the threat actors, and I believe a good over 50%, I'll have to check in the report tomorrow, but over 50%, they said, no, we work with third parties, right? Experts to help me out. So, important to use the expertise that. And then the final piece, obviously, the recovery, right? And we talk about this event all about recovery. If you follow best practices, if you have your immutable backups, I think, if you have your AirGuard backups, I think that's the easiest way to recover, right? Recover from take advantage of the good technology and best practices. Sometimes you have to, get help on trying to decrypt, right? Try to crack some of those decryptions. But it's
one more point on recovery. Everyone remembers the Colonial Pipeline incident. They had viable backups. They ended up restoring from those viable backups, but they paid a ransom. Why? They didn't think that the backup restoration process would go fast enough. So they paid. They got a decryption key. Guess what? Super slow and buggy. This is why working with a firm like Coveware is important, because we can tell you at the assessment, which is day 0, how much data is encrypted. Okay, if we negotiate, pay, get a decryption key, here's how long that's going to take. And I can't tell you how many phone calls we get on where the client's like, we just got to pay, it's going to be too slow. And I'm like, let's calm down for a second. How long did your infrastructure team tell you it was going to take to restore your backups? And they're like, 3 days, unacceptable. And then I'm like, it's going to take you 7 days just to run a decryption tool, not even counting the time to negotiate. Would probably add another 3 days to that as well. So you're looking at 10 days to pay a ransom and recover your data that way versus 3 days. And all of a sudden that sort of contextualizes that 3 days isn't so bad.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more comment there on the Colonial Pipeline case. Most of the damage was part of the containment. They decided to shut down because they were afraid that they were going to be infected in so many places. They just shut down the pipeline that goes from Houston, Texas to New York Harbor, more than 5,000 miles. They were shut down. And then, of course, the issues that we had, in some states that they ran out of gas and all that stuff.
Yeah,
so
very common, self-inflicted business interruption.
As part of the containment.
Right. We can't figure out how to contain at the localized level where we're seeing issues, so we rip every wire out of the wall and shut the company down.
We should do a podcast. There's so many things to talk about. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, guys. Thank you very much for joining. and we'll be around for any questions. We ran out of time for questions, I'm sorry, but we're here. Please join us. Thank you.